My personal story actually starts back in 1980. I was a college student. I got a dreaded call from my mom as I was away at school. It's gone to the Cleveland Clinic. Right there, that tells you something. It would take an act of Congress to drag my father to a hospital. He was found to be in renal failure, so that means his kidneys stopped working, and he was put on emergent dialysis. Not been put on dialysis, the toxins would have built up to a dangerous level. But that started his journey for about 9 years of being on dialysis.
You're listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast. We talk with adventurers from around the globe to give you the inspiration you need to get started in the outdoors or keep moving if you're already there. Now here's your host, Kurt Linville.
Happy Monday, everybody. Today's episode is going to be very interesting and very inspirational. It is about a team of people that climbed to the highest point in each of the 50 states, and they did so in record time. It's a very interesting attempt, but there's a catch. They were people that had donated a kidney. So they did this to show that people can live normal, active lives after being a kidney donor, and to bring more attention toward what it means to be a kidney donor to help other people. I just think it's super cool. Before we dive into that, I wanted to give you a short update on the Kilimanjaro project, where we are raising $20,000 to give to We See Hope, which is an organization that helps impoverished and homeless kids in Africa. Super duper cool. Several people have donated over the weekend, and that brought the Adventure Sports Podcast family total to well over $2,000. So we're a tenth the way there now, and that's good. It's a milestone. We got a tenth the way there to the $20,000. We have 5 weeks before I head to Africa for this trip, so not a lot of time. And I wanted to say a special thank you to everyone that has donated. Dan Schaefer, Caleb Linville, Lydia and Matt Laskanik, Margaret Stork-Van Ed Wasserman, Laura Coates, Jonathan Blanchard, Alice Schneider, Paul Sorensen, Pete Waldroop, James Wetter, Paula Moldenhauer, Dina Wampler, Marita Reese, and Hope Dice Clark have all donated on behalf of the Adventure Sports Podcast family for Climbing for Change 2026 to help We See Hope. Thank you so very, very much on behalf of the kids that are going to be benefiting from this. And keep in mind, none of this money goes to any of the climbers. It's all for We See Hope to help these kids. So thank you. And now on with the show. In 2017, Matt Harmody, Dr. Matt Harmody, donated a kidney, undirected, and we'll find out what that means. But he did it for a reason, and he's a huge advocate of organ donation to help other people. And one way that he wanted to prove to the world that you can still have a regular life after you've donated a kidney is by summiting the 50 highest points in all 50 states, and he and his team actually did this in 41 days. Amazing. He's also written a book entitled Ascending America, and it's about the 50 high point climb, and I am so excited to get to visit with him today. Matt, welcome to the program.
To be here, Kurt. Thank you.
Wow. You not only did the 50 high points in the 50 states, but you also have, you're a guy who likes to do triathlons, ultra marathons, adventure races. You did the C2C race in Florida, is that right?
Yes, that was quite an experience.
Wow, so you are one of the people that gets it done. Tell us about the C2C. It just sounds wild to me.
Yeah, so I had a friend or two having done that race previously. While adventure racing is mostly a team sport, as I'm sure many of your listeners know, I tend to do the races solo.
Okay.
For many reasons, mostly because of a 25-year career as an ER doc. My schedule is so irregular that it was really tough to coordinate training with teammates. So, and I just enjoyed being out there by myself. And, you just live or die on your decisions and your abilities. but it was highly recommended that I do not try the C to C for the first time solo. My wife was pretty excited that I decided not to. So I did it with kind of a friend of a friend. And that was probably, in hindsight, a pretty good choice.
Mm,
I can remember actually falling asleep while I was riding my bike and
wow.
also paddling in one of the legs. But yeah, that, certainly a very well run event. It's pretty flat, but, it got hot. We got rained on. You have your various mechanical challenges. But yeah, it was quite an adventure. We finished, and that was the primary goal. We really weren't that competitive, but we didn't expect to be, and made it safely through, and really had a great time.
Okay, tell us about all the different modalities that you did in this race, because you already mentioned paddling and biking, but what all was there?
Yeah, so it mostly entailed hiking, running, which became more hiking towards the end.
Right.
Of course, part of that on foot is trekking off trail. So there were a lot of checkpoints that were up in the woods somewhere that required you to navigate off trail. And maybe just to back up a step, adventure racing is a map and compass sport, so there's no
Right.
GPS. We probably had 30 or 40 pages of maps for
Wow.
those 3 days or 72 hours. Each of them in somewhat of a different format. The scale may have been different. It may have been most of them were topo maps. Some were kind of a Google overhead view. So that was a challenge in and of itself. But yes, on foot, paddling, and of course C to C had paddling near the coast, and of course inland waterways, and then mountain biking is the other primary mode of transportation. The paddling was something else. I mean, we were just out kind of off the shores in through these huge waterways. Fortunately, my teammate was a very strong paddler, so he just put me in front, and I was, as much of an engine as I could be, and he navigated around, oyster beds that would potentially cut through your aluminum canoe.
Wow.
But I think the biggest part of the finish, especially as it comes to paddling, is we were making our way into the finish, into this huge headwind, and we were so exhausted. It was the last leg. You were paddling into the finish, and you would look across at some fixed reference point. We realized we weren't making any progress. There was a
Oh,
decent
no.
chop in the water, and we would just kind of make it to the shoreline and then head back out a little bit and get blown back to the shore. And we saw one team rescued out in that bay.
Oh, goodness.
They overturned their canoe, so we were the last ones to paddle that last leg. And after that, they just had people ride in from that last checkpoint.
Goodness. Just too much wind, too big of
Yes.
waves. That's crazy. So, about how many miles was this total?
We put in, well, this is a big guess, maybe 250 to 275. I would think that maybe two-thirds of it was bike, and maybe a third each paddle and foot, maybe a little bit more foot than paddle. But yeah, it's quite an event. I'm glad I did it. But yeah, we saw just so many great places. And, if you've never done an adventure race, there's certainly the top teams that are competing for podium spots, but the majority of us are weekend warriors. People are out to help. People get mechanical problems, you stop and help. You're out there for 72 hours, so a couple of minutes here or there are really not going to make too much of a difference.
Oh, that's fantastic. We could do this whole interview just on your C2C adventure race, because I think it sounds so cool. And if people want to get involved in that, do you have any recommendations? Because we're going to move on to other topics, but I just think it's so neat.
Yeah, the C2C is easy to find. I think there are also some clearinghouse websites that are escaping me for the moment, but I think there's an adventure racing collective. Also, the U.S. Adventure Racing Association has a lot of resources there, as well as, most of the major adventure races. And, not to discourage someone from getting involved. I can remember my first adventure race was actually with my teenage son. He was in high school, and it was just an hour from us in a state park. And I think it was a 4 or 6 hour event.
Nice.
So there's very easy entry points. And you can do it as a team. Most teams are 2 to 4 people. I would just make sure that you have a decent mountain bike, number one. And number two, you have someone on your team that knows how to navigate.
Well, the orienteering sounds fascinating. So many people these days don't really have a context, might be the right word for it, because we have Google Maps and we have GPS. And I mean, a lot of people don't even drive across town and know how to get from point A to point B anymore because they just follow the lady.
Yes, that's right. I feel more comfortable navigating on a topo map than I do using Google Maps or somebody talking to me.
Well, okay, I have one question about that, and then we're going to move on. But if you need to know where you are, you can triangulate if you can find landmarks. But in a place like Florida, it's flat, and there are trees, and you may not be able to see any landmarks. So how do you sort out where you are?
I can remember one distinct time where we were, you never really say lost. I think the euphemism is either off the map or, off trail. But my teammate and I attempted to triangulate, and we were able to find 2 towers, probably both cell phone towers, that fortunately were marked on the map.
Oh, there you go.
And because it was flat, we were better able to see them, and we were out in an open area. Now, if we were in a forested area, that would not have worked. But it's actually the first time in a race I'd used triangulation. But yes, you just have to take in all aspects. You get off map, you have to constantly, you're basically just taking a confluence of information and making your best determination of where you are. And that includes having a backstop. All right, if I reach this mark, and maybe say a stream or a river, I've gone too far and I know I need to turn around. And you have to trust land features well before man-made features. Trails are traditionally relatively inaccurate. Some maps have all the trails. Some maps are missing some trails. Some trails appear on a map that are no longer there. So you really have to be careful about man-made marks on a topo map. But it's a lot of fun. With a career in emergency medicine where your attention span is measured like in seconds and minutes because of all the interruptions, it's really the only thing that I found that once I start and get into it, I don't think about anything else, especially overnight races, because it gets far more difficult in the dark. And if I'm by myself, it's like it's me, and you got to pay attention. So those brief little lapses, you really can't afford, because soon enough you're not sure where you are, and the night goblins start entering your mind as you get tired, and the race directors will also tell you it's self-rescue, so you're on your own until the race is over, and they'll have some general degree of where you are, if you're hurt and you can't be mobile, but so it puts a new, an interesting perspective on it when that's at stake, and I just find that challenging and very very fun to do.
Well, that's neat. I have 2 things I have to throw out there just because I've interviewed so many people who do their adventure sport, whatever it is, so that they can just get present in the now and get out of their own head enough to just experience that flow state. And for some people, that's the number one motivation. It's why they do it. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that as well. It's a very healthy thing to do. So
yes,
it's
even
fantastic.
If that's just going to your local orienteering club and going out in the woods for an hour or 2 on a map and compass. And certainly there are multi-day events and even longer events to participate in. But it's very easy to get started. That's how I did. I have an orienteering club an hour away, and I never learned to orienteer in scouts or the military like a lot of people. So I taught myself how to orienteer and went to the orienteering club events. And that's really how I got started in adventure racing.
My sons and I, two of my sons and I, did a 9-day through hike in the Holy Cross Wilderness here in Colorado. And most of the area didn't have trails. It wasn't a matter of being off trail. There just were no trails. It was that remote.
Yep.
And for 9 days, I had studied the terrain and the maps and things. And for 9 days, we were fine. We were exactly where we needed to be until we got to a trail. And then we got lost.
Go figure.
That's what happens. The other thing I wanted to mention, and maybe you can speak to this since you're an emergency room doc. One of our guests, and I've heard a variety of stories like this. I've only experienced it once in my own life. But one of our guests, Robin Benincasa, was on a multi-day paddling event. And going without sleep and paddling and working that hard for that long, she came to a checkpoint and her husband was there at a dock. And she paddled up to the dock and said, "Is there a witch sitting on the bow of my kayak?" And he says, "No, she's not there." She goes, "Okay, I'm going to ignore her. We'll just keep going." And
yes.
Have you experienced anything like that?
Well, yeah, that's the advantage of racing with teammates, is that you can ask that question anytime. But in her case, obviously at a checkpoint, asking someone that's not as sleep deprived as she is. I've seen things moving that probably weren't there. And
Wow.
especially at night, the sounds start being mysterious.
Sure.
And I can remember distinctly in the A bike section in the C2C that I was riding downhill in the dark, and I just thought there were like 10s of 20s of cyclists around me. And I think there may have been like 2 or 3 of us.
Wow.
You know, you run into all kinds of wildlife, and then you start to, imagine that, all right, that sound is another black bear that you saw one 30 minutes ago, right? So it's front and center in your mind. And parts of Florida have wild boar, and we saw a lot of ground uprooted in areas, especially on some of the single track mountain biking that was part of the race. And, you just come around these corners and you're just half expecting to see a wild boar in your midst. And from what I've been told, they're not friendly and they're not terribly skittish. So that presented a little extra fear. But yeah, we never ran into one. But we did come up on a black bear that was probably more frightened by us than vice versa. And we were on our bikes, and he just was, rummaging through trash cans in a a low density camping area.
Well, there are all sorts of amazing experiences we have when we put ourselves out there, that's for sure. Let's go back to how I started the introduction. 2017, kidney donor, non-directed. What does that mean?
So non-directed also goes by other terms that people may have heard. Altruistic is another word. I don't particularly like that word because I would argue that anyone that donates a kidney is being altruistic.
Yes.
Directed means I've identified a person, maybe a family friend, loved one, and I'm going to donate my kidney to that individual. So non-directed is, in most cases, I want to help someone. I want to help the person who best matches my kidney. So I would put that kidney in what I call the pool of kidneys available at any given point in time. And we can talk about the systems that are in place in this country to properly match a kidney being donated so that it does get to the best matched person is probably a better way to say that. So a better matched kidney allows for, on average, a longer life for that kidney. And that also likely means less anti-rejection medications that a recipient needs to take. So they have a better life, a lower risk of getting serious infections. And we can get into all that detail, but it's somewhat of a long-winded explanation for what a non-directed donor is. Basically donating a kidney to a stranger.
Okay, so a lot of people are going to have a lot of questions about that, Matt, and you have made it a focus, a mission of yours to let people know life goes on after kidney donation. You can still do the things you want to do, and maybe it's something worthwhile to consider. So what were your motivations? I mean, what made you decide I'm going to do this? I'm going to donate a kidney. Hey, friends, here at the Adventure Sports Podcast, health is really a priority. That's part of the reason why for over 10 years we've been encouraging people to get out there and have some fun, because when we become more active, it makes us healthier. Our focus on health is one of the reasons that I'm excited about today's sponsor, True Diagnostic. Did you know that your calendar age doesn't always match how old your body truly is? Your biological age, the age of your cells and organs, is actually the number one predictor of your risk for serious diseases like heart disease, cancer, dementia, and more. That's why learning your biological age can be truly life-changing, and that's exactly what the True Age test from True Diagnostic helps you do. It's a simple at-home test. You just prick your finger and then use the provided packaging and a prepaid envelope to send the sample in for testing. No doctor's visits required, no labs, but you'll get great information that can help you to be healthier and understand how you're doing with your own health habits. Now, I always joke that I'm 23 years old. You've heard me say that forever. Obviously, I'm quite a bit older than that, but I'm curious to find out what my biological age is. It's kind of eye-opening when you learn that your biological age, if it's just 5 years older than your actual age, your risk for major diseases can go up by 30 to 50%. That's kind of a wake-up call. But due to epigenetics, and this is the part that really inspires me, up to 90% of biological aging is driven by lifestyle. That means the way that we eat, move, sleep, manage stress, all these things play massive roles in how fast or slow our bodies age. That aligns with the Adventure Sports podcast so much. So I'm taking the test. I'm excited to find out the results. And in addition to my biological age, True Diagnostic also provides a personalized report that's full of science-backed steps that we can all take to slow down aging and improve our health over time. If you care about protecting your health and want to find out what your real age is, head over to truediagnostic.com and use my code ASP to get 20% off your entire order or subscription. That's truediagnostic.com. Use ASP at checkout to get 20% off. Your future self will thank you. Oh man, this sponsor just keeps reminding me what a lousy shopper I am. The holidays are almost here, and if you still have names on your list, don't panic. Well, guess what? I have a lot of names on my list. Uncommon Goods makes holiday shopping stress-free and joyful with thousands of one-of-a-kind gifts you can't find anywhere else. And so I went on their website just to look around, and lots of original things. Here's one that caught my eye. I really like weather. I like nature. They have these teardrop-shaped glass globes that have a material in them that looks like bubbles, but they change depending on the weather. So it helps you to forecast the weather. And so it's kind of a beautiful item you can set on a shelf, but as you look at it, it can also kind of give you a feel for what's going to happen outside. So I thought that was super cool. Uncommon Goods has all sorts of things like this that I normally wouldn't find in the standard department store. That's the point. I also like the way that their website is broken up for people that you're shopping for. You can click to shop for mom, or click to shop for dad, or kids, or book lovers, gardeners, mixologists. And when you shop at Uncommon Goods, you're supporting artists and small independent businesses. And here's my favorite part. With every purchase that you make at Uncommon Goods, they give back $1 to a nonprofit partner of your choice. And they have donated more than $3.1 million to date. So don't wait. Make this holiday the year you give something truly unforgettable. To get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/ASP. That's uncommongoods.com/ASP for 15% off. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Uncommon Goods, we're all out of the ordinary.
Most people have a story that leads them to wanting to be a kidney donor. It's not something that most people just wake up one day and decide to do. Of course, there's a lot of considerations to take into account. So my personal story actually starts back in 1980. I was a college student. I got a dreaded call from my mom as I was away at school. I gone to the Cleveland Clinic. Right there, that tells you something. It would take an act of Congress to drag my father to a hospital. He was found to be in renal failure. So that means his kidneys stopped working, and he was put on emergent dialysis. And we can talk about dialysis, but that's a relatively poor substitute for your kidneys working. But if he had not been put on dialysis, the toxins would have built up to a dangerous level and in most cases affect someone's heart and could potentially kill somebody if it's gone too far. But that started his journey for about 9 years of being on dialysis. And for most people, that means going to a dialysis center, sitting on a machine for 4 to 5 hours, having basically your blood taken out, sent through a machine that filters out extra fluid and toxins, and then put your blood back in. It's devastating from an energy level. Most people do that 3 times a week. So my dad would come home, be shot for the rest of the day, mostly recover the following day, and then guess what? He's going back in for another treatment.
Time. Wow.
And it like I said, dialysis is a very poor substitute. And what happens is the difference that your real kidney does with respect to removing fluid and toxins versus dialysis, that differential just begins to deteriorate your major organs, that being your brain, your heart primarily. And people begin to become kind of generally sick. And my dad, was an attorney. He was an outdoorsman, hunted and fished as often as he could. And I watched him just spiral downward over time. Unfortunately, he did not want to consider having a family member be a living kidney donor. So that's how most people would first approach someone with kidney failure, is to find a living kidney donor. And generally, people that are related are much more apt to be a match than unrelated people. But he felt pretty strongly that he did not want to accept a living kidney donation from either 2 of his brothers or from his children. I'm the oldest of 3, and I was 20-ish at that time. He felt that he had lived a good life, and he didn't want to jeopardize someone else's life on his behalf. And I always saw that as a missed opportunity to be able to help my father improve his life. And I always carried that with me. I was an engineer at the time. His whole experience led me to go back to medical school at age 30. And I went into emergency medicine and got reminded my father nearly every day. I was seeing at least one person on dialysis. And usually if they're coming to the emergency department, you're not seeing them at their finest hour, certainly. Some of them were in life-threatening conditions. But I finally reached a point where if I couldn't help my father, I could at least help someone else. So in 2017, I started the process of being evaluated to be a living kidney donor. And on further reflection, I saw my dad's situation as a missed opportunity. I think in hindsight, it was a selfless act on his part that allowed me later to donate to someone else and save a life. Hopefully a little bit wiser now than I probably was at 20. And I kind of felt like, why not? Why not consider this? And I just felt bad about that whole situation. So, but what's turned out is, been a very positive event in my life. And yes, you're right. So I've done some advocacy work while I've been working full time, but a few years ago, I just reached a point where I wanted to do more advocacy work. And career in emergency medicine is pretty demanding, and I wanted that extra time to shift gears and do more advocacy work.
Well, your message is that people can live a normal life after donating a kidney. So speak to that a little bit. What are the considerations?
Yeah, so the criteria are very stringent in becoming a living kidney donor. I don't want to say that to discourage anyone for pursuing that, but they are taking, a healthy person, and a lot of people would argue you're not gaining any benefit by being a donor, so they're putting you at risk because it is you're going to be under general anesthesia, and that they want to be absolutely certain that mentally, physically, you're up for the task. I would strongly disagree with the fact that a donor doesn't receive any benefit, and we can certainly talk about that. But it's not age limited. I know people in their 70s that have donated a kidney. Usually you have to be 18 or 21, depending on which transplant center you're working with. But yes, there's a series of tests that involve your past medical history. So there are some things that are called absolute contraindications. So I always tell the example of, well, if you only have one kidney, obviously that's a absolute contraindication, right?
Right.
You can't live with 0 kidneys. But a relative contraindication may be something that has an answer of it depends, right? So nowadays you can actually have diabetes, and that be a relative contraindication. So it used to be that any history of diabetes, you could not be a donor. Now, if you're very well controlled, you're simply on oral medications and not insulin and some other factors, you could still potentially be a living kidney donor. Why diabetes? Why is that a consideration? Hypertension or high blood pressure and diabetes are the two greatest risk factors for developing kidney disease. So obviously, if you're at risk for that, they don't want to, further hinder you by removing a kidney. So back to the testing, there's some blood work, urine work, a lot of imaging, a CAT scan of your abdomen and pelvis area. You meet with someone that does a psychiatric evaluation. That could be a social worker or a psychiatrist. It's not an insignificant event. Most people do very well and have very little, if any, complications. I like to compare it to pregnancy and a woman delivering. It's actually slightly less risky than a woman going through full-term pregnancy and delivery. So I think that puts it into perspective. The risk is not zero,
right?
In either case, but it's extremely low risk. And the recovery generally is pretty straightforward for most people. I can speak about my own recovery. Surgery on a Tuesday, I was up to a chair that afternoon, walking the halls. The next day, I kind of had a borderline fever, so they wanted to be extra cautious and keep me another night. So I was actually walking outside around the hospital day 2, went home day 3, walked a few miles in the neighborhood. I would say my full recovery was measured by completing a 100K trail race in the following January. So late September surgery and mid-January the following year. So a handful of months, I was doing a local 100K trail race. And I'd done that race a handful of times. Like I said, that was when I finished that, it's like, all right, I'm 100% recovered. Now, it wasn't my best finish, but I was a little undertrained, but I completed it, and that was the goal.
Wow. I like the way that you're shining a light on this, Matt, so that people understand. And I can see how people would be concerned, but also knowledge is power, right? And you're letting people know this is a big deal, but it's something that you can actually do.
Yes, there's I think his last name is Chrisman. If people wanted a little bit more information, I just listened to another podcast. He is known for a podcast called The Great Social Experiment, and he takes people through the history of dialysis, how it started, how it got approved in Congress to be covered by Medicare, and that's a story I'm happy to discuss. But one of his best lines, I feel, that he had was that there is not a shortage of kidneys. We can talk about how many people are on the wait list. There's not a shortage of kidneys. There's just a shortage of people that are unaware of the need and what's involved and how you can return to a normal life, even a very active life. And that gets to the heart of why we did the 50-state summit trip.
Okay, so the 50-state summit trip, I don't have the year written down here. Was it
2023?
Okay,
2023. Yep.
And so this is so cool. People like to have lists that they check off, and there's a personality type, I think, that really enjoys that, and then other people are like, well, I do it for this reason or that reason or that. It doesn't matter what the motivation is for people. Having an excuse to go and do whatever your reason is, I think is great. But the idea, your list was the 50 peaks in the 50 states. And some people are thinking things like Kansas, Iowa, Nebraska, right? And they're like, what?
We went to all those.
Well, this is amazing. You summited all these peaks in 41 days, and I could see how that would be pretty doable until you start thinking about peaks like Denali, the big one. But there's several that are very large. I mean, you've got Whitney, right? You've got Elbert. Is Rainier on the list?
Yep.
So there are a lot of big peaks.
Yes, there are.
So tell us about that. First of all, how did you have the idea? How did this come together?
Yeah, so I Just to be clear, I'm one of 5 living kidney donors that made up the team, and Dave Ashley was our team captain, lead climber. I was in a support role, so I provided all the medical care that anyone on the team needed, and I did roughly half of the driving, and we can talk about all that.
A
And
lot
I
of driving.
personally got to about half of the high points. But our goal, we had 2 support people and we started with 3 climbers, was to get all 3 climbers to all 50 high points. So Dave is an experienced climber. He's actually done the 7 summits, which again, for your listeners, the highest peak in each of the 7 continents. He'd done that the previous year, which is just a huge accomplishment. And he wanted to bring something closer to home, and he wanted to do something directly related to living kidney donation. And he did, some research came up with, all right, we want to do something outdoors, we want to do something involving climbing. And he visited some of the high pointing websites, and it's like, oh, this is, really a thing. Not only is it really a thing, but there's actually a Guinness World Record associated with doing it the fastest. Our team, as it came together, of course, we're all pretty competitive. And it makes, of course, for a much more interesting story, right? So
Sure.
we had pretty decent following on social media. We kept people updated on where we were, and had a map that we colored each state after we accomplished it. So it was just a really neat way for people to follow us. So Dave actually did all the recon and had climbed every peak, mostly on his own. He picked up some other folks to climb with him, but he wanted to, calculate about how long it took him, how close we could get what ended up being a 23-foot RV to a trailhead. In some cases, we could not get to a trailhead, and for different reasons. We actually had, in a couple of cases, people with 4-wheel drive vehicles meet us in the closest town, and then that individual drove the climbers to the trailhead. And then one case actually accompanied the climbers to the peak and back. So we had some help there. And he built a team. He thought that it was important that it was a team and not just one individual.
Yes.
He's, of course, had a lot of contact with people that do a lot of climbing. We have a couple of large organizations, the Kidney Donor Athletes and the National Kidney Donation Organization. So those are pretty large advocacy groups in the living kidney donor world. And he had met Jay, one of the other climbers, when he went to go climb Albert, and he became part of the team. He thought it was important to have a mix of men and women, so he put out a call for a woman that was interested, and that ended up being Jody, who's actually summited Denali, which was a huge advantage and benefit for the team with her experience. Dave is also, of course, summited Denali.
Right.
And then Emily and I were the crew. Emily and Dave did most of the logistical planning, and we can get into that detail as much as you care to. It was a tremendous effort trying to just determine what order of states to do. There were all kinds of restrictions. Some of the high points are on private property. Some need permits, as you're, I'm sure, well aware.
Mm-hmm.
Some have random opening dates, like Baxter State Park, which is where Katahdin is in Maine's high point. And they open at variable days of the year. I mean, it's generally kind of in the May to June timeframe, but when you're on the clock,
Oh, wow.
you can't come to the state park there and find that it's closed. So yeah, a lot of planning, a lot of great stories involved with that. I was actually kind of a late addition to the team, but yeah. So that was the constitution of the team and how we got started. The National Kidney Registry was our primary sponsor, and we can talk a little bit about their role in living kidney donation. And we set out and started on Denali.
Oh,
and
started with the tough one first.
Yes, because if you're not successful there, then you just have to regroup on the whole trip, right?
Yeah, good point.
And then Hawaii, just geographically close. And then we met the team in Chicago with our 23-foot rented RV, all stocked and ready to go. And then we traveled mostly counterclockwise around the U.S. And we can get into all the trials and tribulations. We had some major challenges. I felt like we were readjusting our strategy and plans, sometimes by the hour, depending on circumstances that we ran into.
So flexibility was a big part of the success then.
Yes.
So it sounds fascinating. Just give us the kind of the highlights of what this looks like. So you have people that are climbing, people that are supporting, you're traveling between. There's sleep to be concerned about, nutrition to be concerned about, all the normal human things. And somehow all of this has to come together to set a new record.
Yes. So we had everything mapped out as to how we had hoped things would go. We had, I haven't really even touched on Guinness. We felt that it was important to, have an external goal, more to draw interest, right? So the primary goal is, one, to show that there's the myth of kidney donation affecting you physically afterward is just that, a myth, and that you can accomplish really anything that you did prior to donation. I've met so many people that have even accomplished more. They became more serious about their health after donation and have gotten involved with groups like Kidney Donor Athletes and have gotten out and done events. So that's the primary goal. But, to make it a little bit more interesting and challenging, we decided to go after the Guinness World Record. And yes, so we started on Denali. The team went unguided. Maybe I'll make a little legal disclaimer at this point in time. Some of the climbing they did requires experience and technical know-how. I like to tell people I would have no business being on Denali because I have no technical climbing experience. The three climbers had various degrees of climbing experience, with two of them having summited Denali. But they went unguided mostly so that they could move at the pace they wanted to move at, which was generally going to be faster probably than going up guided.
Right.
And it also really saved the team a lot of money. We were on a pretty tight budget. So yes, Denali, the success rate there is about 50% in summiting for all the climbers that attempt it. That year it was 15% for a lot of different reasons. And despite all that, the team was successful in summiting. It was both fascinating and frustrating to follow them via a Garmin InReach device, which was basically our primary form of communication. We were trying to provide them weather forecasts. Of course, the rangers at Denali, provide daily weather forecasts, which they were using. Jody, who's from Anchorage, is actually an airline captain, and she has a lot of contacts in the airline industry, and she was getting all kinds of weather reports because, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, those weather windows open and close, allowing summit attempts that are reasonably safe with a high chance for success. And there are other times where you're just hunkered down waiting for weather to pass. So we're providing weather forecasts, try to provide some medical assistance via short texts through an InReach device. The team had a lot of troubles with blisters. I would have loved to have seen pictures of how bad they were. Were they getting infected?
Wow.
There was no bandwidth to send pictures, especially under those conditions. There was an accidental ingestion of some camp gas.
Oh, no.
That was small and didn't result in any harm. I'm not sure what altitude they were, but they were 17-ish thousand feet, and now worried about whether someone's had a toxic ingestion. So I reassured the team after getting a little bit more detail that that should be fine. Here are the things to watch out for. But yes, they summited, raced down to the bottom, got off Talkeetna and the glacier by the skin of their teeth. That's weather related. That's a whole nother story. That's very interesting. It would have cost the team another 4 days had they not hurried up and got off, because the plane lined up behind him never got off. And the poor pilot apparently had to spend 4 days at base camp without any clothes or food in preparation for that. I guess it had been years and years since that had ever happened. He or she had a lot of support, and of course people chipped in and provided shelter and food and clothing for the pilot. then off back to Anchorage, kind of regrouped with equipment, and then a quick flight to Hawaii. And then, like I said, we met in Chicago. That was the first time the whole team was together. And keep in mind, we all knew each other to some degree, some more than others, but it was pretty close to putting five strangers in a 25-foot or 23-foot RV. We also had a sixth individual, a young gentleman who's a big-time endurance athlete, FKT record holder, who was our videographer and photographer on the trip. So he joined us to make six adults in this little RV.
Wow. I bet your family now, right?
That's right. Yeah. It's a little bit of Big Brother, a little bit of, family. Maybe Chevy Chase's family vacation movie might come to mind. But the routine, as much as there was routine, was Emily and I split the driving. We drove to the next trailhead. We prepped the team. So that could be cooking, could be getting climbing gear out, could be reviewing kind of a cheat sheet for every climb.
Right.
How long, altitude gain, weather. We had it down to, and it was mostly Emily's work, what the hazards were, and I can distinctly remember like Minnesota was infested with mosquitoes. We opened that RV door to get going, and it was just millions of mosquitoes everywhere.
Oh no.
Yeah. All right. So there are worse hazards than mosquitoes. Trying to keep
miserable.
them. Trying to keep them out of the RV. Trying to get everyone sprayed down so they just didn't get eaten alive. So we'd get the climbers out and on their way. I would often join them if I weren't trying to sleep, and I might just go for the first mile or two because my primary responsibility was to have all the preparations done before they got back.
Right.
Some of the real easy climbs, the whole team did, and then we all came back and then headed out. But in some cases we had, in one case we had, 24 plus hours to get things done. And then the team would come back. They would kind of give us a heads up when they were getting close so that we could kind of be, pointed in the right direction, have food cooked, have space to get, wet clothes out, dried, make sure the shower is ready to go for, 5, relatively quick showers. And then the team generally ate, went right to bed. And then we agreed on about how long it would be to the next trailhead and what time people wanted wake-up calls. And we would rinse and repeat. Some of those longer climbs is when we would do things like getting oil changes on the RV, changing out water, disposing of gray and black water, refilling water tanks, refueling, laundry, grocery shopping.
The logistics, Matt, sound crazy. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. A lot of people don't think of things like, oh, we have to change the oil during this world record attempt,
Yes.
But you're covering the miles. How many miles did you put on that RV?
I would put probably the total mileage driven for the trip at about 17,000. Now, with some hiccups, we ended up using other vehicles, and we can kind of get into some of the major hiccups that we had. But yes, some of your audience that are RV owners will be laughing at a couple of those stories that I would tell on myself primarily. But we were in the Yellowstone area. It was well overdue for an oil change. Of course, that's got to be one of the RV capitals of the country, right?
Right.
And the oil service stations aren't your smaller regular vehicle. There are these massive caverns because they're taking in these huge RVs to do oil changes. And we drove by one, a couple of bays were open. It's like we could just stop in there real quick because we had to get back to the trailhead. And we walk in there and we say, we're here for an oil change. And the woman's like, well, do you have an appointment? It's like, no, we explained our trip, which we did a lot of. That's what we were there for, was spreading the word. And she kind of looked at us and was like, we're booking 6 to 8 weeks out for appointments for oil changes.
Of course they are.
You just don't pull in to get your RV oil change. So that was a challenge in and of itself. They do have some mobile people, but we literally had to drive an hour to meet a mobile technician in a gas station parking lot so he could change the oil while we waited. And then we got back to the team. And, all those things are trying to be done, Kurt, so we didn't lose any time. You don't want God forbid the climber sitting at a trailhead, wet, cold, hungry, and tired, and we're nowhere to be found. So
Right.
that was always the goal. But yes, it was a lot of challenges, a lot of logistics. The biggest challenge was actually the weather. I don't know if you recall, but the Northwest received near record or record snowfall that previous winter. So, once we left Illinois, we headed, through the Dakotas, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, all that area. And then the first big climb was going to be Granite in Montana. And we got there and we couldn't even get to the trailhead. We
Wow.
decided we were about a mile short because of the snow. And that was going to be a long climb, expected to be 18 hours round trip. And got the team ready, prepared, all the gear out. They were post-holing in snow at times up to their waist, almost from the trailhead onward.
Needed snowshoes.
Yeah, it had snowshoes, but what they did not have were crampons and helmets, unfortunately. Again, that was something we reviewed at every trailhead. Of course, when you're getting out in Florida or Delaware, there's not much to review. Just get out, get to the marker, and do what we need to do and get back. But yeah, so the decision was not to take some of that equipment, and I don't think the climbers realized how difficult the conditions were. In hindsight, it probably would have made sense to just move on, just skip one to several. But you're there.
Come back around.
That high point is hours from the next high point. So
Yeah.
you've now just eaten all that time if you're going to drive back to it at some point. And people, they're at the trailhead. They're relatively well rested. They're excited. This is going to be a challenging climb, probably the first one since Denali. There's a lot of adrenaline, and we're here to do the climb. So they headed out and got to the base of the summit. It probably took them twice as long to get there as anticipated, and kind of had the first fracture in the team. Part of the team was not comfortable with the risk involved with continuing, especially without. I may take that back. They may very well have had crampons, but I don't think they had ice axes, and I know they didn't have helmets because there was a little bit of kind of rock falling as they started up the steep incline towards the summit, and that was a risk concern to some of the climbers. As it turns out, Dave felt safe continuing, so he continued onto the summit. The rest of the climbers decided it was unsafe and turned around and started heading back. So both those scenarios presented the first big challenges.
Yeah.
One, what do you do with part of the team making a summit, the rest of the team not summiting? Do you come back later? For the others, two, what's this weather going to be like through the rest of the Northwest? And as it turns out, with some phone calls, we realized that it was likely going to be bad in several of those places, Hood, Rainier, Whitney, Bora Peak in Idaho. So after that lesson on Granite, we decided to skip 4 of those Western summits and come back to them. So that was a huge decision to make, because our ultimate goal, Kurt, was to finish in Maine for several reasons. But now that meant once we did Katahdin, we were getting on a plane and going back to LAX.
Wow.
To do those last 4. Plus, it also turns out to be Granite. So all the climbers had tracking devices, which was part of the Guinness World Record requirement. And it was also certainly a safety factor so that we knew roughly where people were and we could communicate. Dave had some climbing friends checking his GPS data, especially on the more difficult climbs. And maybe about halfway through the whole trip, a friend of his got up with him and said, Dave, you may want to look at your Granite data. It looks like you didn't quite hit the summit.
No.
And, with all the snow and it was raining and sleeting, temperatures were about freezing. It was at night, and he determined he was 200 meters from the true summit.
Wow.
And he just, kind of shared that with the team. It's like, got to go back and do Granite again. So that added a 5th Western summit that we went back to do. And, it is what it is.
And 51 climbs.
That's right. 2 weeks later, it's quite amazing how much more snow had melted and how much easier those climbs were. They certainly weren't a walk in the park, but
Right.
they were much easier than the first attempts made.
Well, Matt, I have a partial list in front of me of what the peaks are, and it's not a complete list for some reason. I'm struggling with that, but some of these are kind of surprising. Arizona is nearly 13,000 feet, Humphreys Peak. Of course, California's Whitney, Colorado's Elbert. These are the ones we know, but there's some you look at it and say, really? How did they get that high there? Georgia, almost 5,000 feet. That's not bad. Hawaii is almost 14,000 feet. I don't know if people are aware of that, but that's a tall volcano.
Yes.
It's
quite cold up there too, despite it being Hawaii.
Well, and then Granite Peak is almost 13,000.
Yes.
It's 12,799 according to this. Nevada, now I would not have thought of this. Nevada is 13,000 feet. That's Boundary Peak.
Yes.
So I don't know. It's a very interesting list. There's some that you think, well, they just kind of walked through a field probably and came back. But you still have to get there and do that. All the logistics still apply.
So a brief funny story about the lowest high point in the country, which is Florida, in Britton Hill. We had some early social media comments, one of which somewhat got under Dave's skin. The person was making fun of the fact that we were going to have to climb Britton Hill. And it was sarcastic, kind of like, don't hurt yourself, don't overexert yourself kind of thing. And Dave was just like, why don't people just focus on the really challenging ones that are facing us and not be diminishing our efforts? And he just kind of took it personally. So Hunter, our videographer, bugged him a good part of the trip. It's like, Dave, you just need to do something fun in Florida to just kind of, nicely kind of point a finger back at the naysayers or the comedians in social media. And Dave's pretty straight-laced in a good way. And he is like, I don't want to make this comedy hour. I don't want to be doing something silly. And I think either just fatigue or constant badgering by the team. But we had him dress up as if he were climbing Denali. So he had his ice axe, his helmet, his puffy coat, and he kind of trudged up to the high point like he was, summiting some very high peak. And then Hunter in his youthful exuberance and social media prowess overlaid some snow and some wind. And he posted a video on our social media page. And it was probably one of the funnier episodes of the trip was watching that. Yeah. So every high point had its unique features, a ton of history involved with many of them. And you rattled off some of the more challenging ones.
Well, it's impressive. I'm looking here, obviously Rainier. I mean, that's no joke right there. It looks like there are nearly 20 that are above 10,000 feet.
Yes.
Well, maybe not quite that many, but there are a bunch.
Pretty close.
So it's no small feat, especially when you throw in the huge ones, but just a logistical challenge. So here's a question. You did the thing. Did you set the world record?
Yes. And
how did you celebrate setting the new fastest time for the 50 high points in the 50 U.S.?
Well, Dave, I can fill in the details, but Dave, unfortunately, is the only one to successfully complete all 50. And he finished on Gannett, which is Wyoming. It's very easy to get Granite of Montana and Gannett of Wyoming mixed up. But that's
almost 14, 13.8.
Yes, and to think he had to go back out and do the last 5, all of which were probably the most difficult 5 in the lower 48. He was able to make a phone call to the founder and CEO of the National Kidney Registry, our primary sponsor, and Garrett Hill is his name, and he was in a meeting, and he was able to say, hey, at the top of number 50, which officially is when the clock stops, is at the final summit. He was in a conference room of people in a meeting, and they all kind of gave a big cheer over the phone and, of course, got congratulations from Garrett. But he quickly pointed out, especially since they're both former military, that the mission's not complete until everyone's safe and back in the RV, because it's not 100% easy coming back down. And there have been plenty of stories of climbers falling to their death or incurring significant injury descending.
Sure.
When you think that that's kind of the easy part. So obviously, Hunter was with him, and they obviously made it back down safely. Then Emily had a small cake, and it cooked some food for the team. It was a lot of gas station food and a lot of quick grocery store shops. So there wasn't too many regularly cooked meals on the whole trip. So I think the cake was certainly appreciated. But yes, and then the National Kidney Registry, we didn't talk much about them, Kurt, but briefly, they're the largest living kidney donor facilitator in the country. So they are the system that matches donors with recipients. And they have a pretty complex algorithm that takes about half of the transplant centers in the country that they work with. And there's anywhere from maybe 150 to 200 kidneys that are potentially being donated. And their algorithm uses that to match the best donor kidney with the recipient.
Right.
And these surgeries are coordinated. Sometimes they occur in chains where someone like me would donate to an individual that needs a kidney, and maybe they have a spouse that wants to donate, but they're not a match to their spouse. So then they subsequently donate to another pair. And these chains can go on for quite a few. 10 to 15 is not unusual. And those kidneys are flown all over the country, often by commercial airlines. And those surgeries occur most every day in this country, and kidneys are being flown around. It's quite a logistical challenge, but that's the gold standard for people with kidney failure, is having a living kidney donor. And it lasts, a living kidney lasts about 15 to 20 years, or about twice as long as a deceased donor kidney.
Wow.
So that's the gold standard that we advocate for and support. And I mention that because our hope was to get to the National Kidney Registry's annual gala, which is in late June. And it ends up being that Dave was on Gannett, number 50, during the gala. So we had to kind of just represent him at the gala. And he was well recognized the following year at the next gala. So we kind of missed that a bit, in part because of the weather, in part because of having to go back out west. But we came close.
Well, that's fantastic, though. What a wonderful thing to do. I mentioned to you before we hit record how much I encourage people to do adventure for a reason, not just their ego. Although doing it for yourself is still worth it. But if you can do adventure and make a bigger impact, why not? Why not? And I love what you did. It's
I appreciate that. And I know I'd listened to your conversation with Mike Chambers and talking about beating Mondays. And some people may look at this as like, oh, there's no way I can do any of this. What I found personally, and what a lot of people do, is some of these are grouped pretty closely together. And I know when I travel, I'm seeing how close we're going to be to a high point that I haven't climbed yet.
Yeah.
And I make it a point to put that in our schedule. And you mentioned some of the ones on the East Coast are mostly part of the Appalachian Mountain Range. And you mentioned Georgia. Those are all pretty close together. And we really got cranking when we went through those areas. We did as many as 5 high points in a 24-hour period.
Wow.
Again, not suggesting you drive all night and do them day and night, but it just goes to the point that in a weekend, there are places in this country where you could easily do 2, if not 3, and beat your Monday morning.
Oh, yeah. I love that. I'm telling you, folks, you might not think you have time for an adventure, but you probably do. You may have to scale it correctly. Weekends are so wonderful. What a gift.
Yes. And if you have someone that's with you that doesn't necessarily want to do the climbing, some of them are what are called drive-ups, where you can drive up to the high point.
Oh, there you go.
I've done that before with my wife. Met her at the top, and then we walk, the short distance to the actual high point marker, and made a day of it. So it's there's something out there for everyone.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Matt, we burned through our time, but I really appreciate what you've done. Again, the book is called Ascending America, with the subtitle is 5 Living Kidney Donors, 50 Peaks, 50 states. Did I get all of that? One record-breaking journey.
Yes.
So Ascending America, congratulations on the world record. I think that is really neat, especially because you did it for such a great reason. And
Yes. Thank you.
What other information would you like people to have about how to contact you or get more information about kidney donation, et cetera?
Yeah, so everything about the book, my background, and other resources can be found at mattharmodymd.com.
Okay, mattharmodymd.com.
Yes, and if people are looking for general information about kidney disease, donation, what's involved, I'm actually the chair of the board of directors for an organization called the National Kidney Donation Organization, or NKDO, and that is probably the single biggest clearinghouse of information on that subject. And that website is www.nkdo.org.
Okay, and I'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so people can find that. Matt, thank you very much for your time sharing this with us. It sounds like you have an adventurous lifestyle, but this adventure, the 50 states, I for some reason it just sounds like so much fun. So much fun, and I love that you're helping people find kidneys and a new chance at life. That's a beautiful thing.
That's the bottom line, Kurt, and I appreciate you having me on.
Okay, well, you're most welcome, and to all the listeners out there, find a reason for your fun, but do get out there and have some fun.